Hello everyone and welcome to Mind Over Mic. We are Naomi, Axel, Diego and Elizabeth, and today we're going to talk about some of the readings we explore in our Esol class. In this episode, we're going to focus on how understanding an author's tone and making inference can help us go beyond just what is writing on the surface. Actually, sometimes the most important ideas in a text are not directly stated, so we have to think deeper to really understand them. We're going to also discuss how our cultural background and personal experience influence the way we can interpret the stories, and how two people can read the same text but understanding differently. And finally, we're going to connect these ideas to readings like The Jacket, Esol in Paris, My Name, and share some of our experience about this.
In The Jacket, the narrator is forced to wear that jacket that he really hates. You know, that one, the green, really ugly one that his mom bought him when she asked him for that cool black one with the spikes. It was not just a small preference, like, oh, I don't like this. It actually makes him feel uncomfortable. It's something that he doesn't identify with, and you can feel that right away. Then when he goes to school, the situation becomes even more difficult because other students started judging him. They noticed the jacket and the reaction made him feel embarrassed. And that's when it started to change how he feels about himself. It's not only about the jacket anymore, it became something that affects his confidence and the way that he sees himself in front of others. You can see how something that seems simple at first, like clothing, ends up having a much bigger impact, especially because of how people around him reacted. And overall, it shows how being judged by others can really affect someone, even if the situation itself doesn't seem that important at first.
Okay, so now let's talk about my name. First of all, in the beginning of the story, Esperanza explains how her name has different meanings depending on the language it's used. In Spanish, her name means hope, which is something beautiful and powerful. But in English, it sounds different to her, almost strange, and she doesn't feel like it represents who she really is. As the story continues, we learn that Esperanza was named after her grandmother, that she had a difficult life. She was forced into marriage and didn't have much freedom. And Esperanza doesn't want the same future for herself. Instead, she wants to be independent and create her own identity. Because of this, she started to think about changing her name to something that feels more like her, something that reflects who she wants to become. And the quote to discuss I choose was at the school to say my name is funny.
So, one of the main reading skills we're gonna talk about is making inference. Making inference basically means to understand ideas that are not directly stated in the text. So, instead of only focusing on what the author says, we also try to understand what they imply. It's like reading between lines. You have to pay attention to small details like how characters are, or how they react to situation and what is happening around them, and then use to understand a deeper meaning. This is important because in many of these readings, the author doesn't explain everything directly. Instead, they expect the reader to think more deeply and connect the ideas on their own. So, when we make inference, we're not just trying to read passively, we're actively trying to understand what is really going on the story. Another important reading skill is understanding the author's purpose. This means thinking about why the author wrote the text in the first place. What message are they trying to communicate? What they really want the reader to understand or realize? It's not just about following the events of the story, but also about thinking about the bigger meaning behind it. For example, when we read, we can ask ourselves the question like, what is the author trying to show about people, about society, or about identity? So overall, these reading skills help us to go beyond just understanding the story on the surface and instead help us understand the deeper meaning behind it.
In the jacket, one inference we can make is that the real problem isn't just the jacket itself, but how other people treat the narrator because of it. The jacket kind of becomes a symbol of embarrassment and how he's judged by others, even though it's just clothing. The way his classmates react makes him feel insecure and uncomfortable, which shows how other people's opinion can affect someone's identity. In the stolen party, we can infer that Rosaura is not actually seen as a real guest, but more like a servant. The story doesn't say it directly, but it becomes clear at the end when the mom gives her money instead of treating her like the other kids. That moment shows even though Rosaura thought she belonged, she was always seen differently because of her social class.
Okay, now let's talk about the jacket and the reading skills we can use to understand it better. One important reading skill here is making inferences. This means understanding things that the author doesn't say directly, but he infers it, and we can figure it out with the clues he will leave on the lecture. And another important skill is identifying tone and purpose, which will help us understand how the narrator feels and why the author wrote the story. So look at some inference. Even though the narrator doesn't always directly say, "I feel embarrassed," we can tell he is ashamed of the jacket because he keeps describing how ugly it is and how others react to it. We can also infer that he feels powerless and frustrated since he can convince his mom to return it and feels stuck wearing it to school. So now for the tone and purpose. The tone of the story is regretful and insecure. The narrator looks back on this experience with embarrassment and wishes things had been different. The author's purpose is to show how something so small like a jacket, like clothing, can deeply affect someone's confidence and how others see them. It also highlights themes like identity, insecurity, and not feeling understood. So overall, these reading skills will help us to understand better the emotions behind the story and not just the events.
Well, now I want to share a story that is my own experience because I wanna really see the connections that we have with these stories. So I'm going to tell like the feeling that I have like two different because of language. Learning English at this time, I feel it's so hard. I don't know. It's not the words that I use. It's more like how to explain it. It's more like how I become into a different personality or person when I change my languages. Actually, in Spanish, I feel so confident, and I can be like I am, right? And in English, I feel like I don't know, it's too different. I can't express all I am. I can be what I want, because I think that this language limits a lot of stuff that we can't really translate in. So it's so complicated in a way, because I want to be like myself to another people that maybe don't have the same language than me. So it's, for me, it's the hardest thing that I experience.
For me, one thing that really stood up in these readings is how people can be judged based on their appearance or social status. I think this is something that happens a lot in real life, not just in these stories. Sometimes people make assumptions about others just because of how they look, of what they have, without really knowing them. And I feel like that can really affect how someone sees themselves, especially if that keeps happening over time. I have an anecdote about that I can relate. That it was kind of like in the jacket in elementary school. I broke my backpack, and I had to use this really ugly orange backpack for like 3 months. It was really horrible. I looked like a like a cone of construction for like half of the semester. It was horrible. Nobody was really that mean to me, but I got some weird comments about it, and it's just not a good memory.
All of us can relate to identity, especially when it comes to names and language. For example, sometimes people mispronounce names and change them to make them easier, and that can feel weird because it's a part of who you are. Even if it doesn't seem like a big deal, it can make you feel like you don't fully belong. Also, learning another language can affect how you see yourself. You might feel more confident in one language than another, or feel like different versions of yourself depending on how you speak. These experiences connect to the readings because they all show how identity is shaped by how others see us and how we express ourselves.
Well, in the end, these readings help us realize that reading is not just about understanding a story, it is understanding people. Through tone, inference, and personal connections, we can see deeper meanings that relate to real life experience. It could be like identity, culture, belonging. These stories show that even small moments can have a big impact on how we see ourselves. And well, thank you for joining us on Mind Over Mic.